Hello, I'm Scott Garber. I'm one of your council representatives here in the City of Corinth. And welcome to our ongoing podcast called Let's Talk Corinth. Council set a priority about 2 to 3 years ago to increase the communication within the city between City Hall and all of you. And one of the ways that we plan on doing that is this ongoing podcast series. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the budget, we're going to be talking about our tax rate, and also in the links below, you will find ways to not only see our comprehensive plan, our strategic plan, and our progress on that plan, but also the budget that has been presented to council this month. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce Bob Hart. He's our city manager here at the City of Corinth, and we are going to be asking a few questions back and forth. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Great. So Bob, economic development for the City of Corinth has been top priority now for several years. So Bob, having more restaurants in the City of Corinth, more places to shop, and also the ability to reduce the property tax rate for our residents have been top priority for City Council. Does this budget address those?
Yes, I think it does. And when we talk about that kind of growth, that kind of interest with regard to economic development, it is a longer term kind of strategy because it's dependent to a large degree on population within the community and within the region. Disposable income is important, and then also the propensity or the climate for people to want to go out and eat within the community. So given those kind of parameters or that kind of view, this budget, I think, addresses it very well. One is that it does contain funding for the streets and that critical infrastructure in and around the development of the Agora. And when we talk about the Agora, we're talking about the development of that property between City Hall and the NCTC campus. So included in that is the Commons, which will be a park, in the pavilion, a playground and so forth, a gathering place to get people to come down here and want to do something. Now, coupled with that, there'll be restaurants in the area, so that would be an inducement for folks to come and to hang out. So in that sense, yes, I think the budget addresses this very well, and it will be a longer-term strategy.
So not only does our budget address this, but we also have quite a buy-in from Denton County, don't we?
Yes. One of the mechanisms that we use to help pay for the infrastructure, and that is the drainage, streets, and utilities and all, are being done through what's referred to as a tax increment financing district. And so we have created this financing district. The county is participating in the first 10 years at 90%, the next 10 years at 80%, and so forth. So that's a significant investment on the part of the county within the community. And so that allows us to develop the infrastructure and using outside resources, which is always is helpful and makes it a little more sustainable and a little more possible for our development.
And my understanding is we are the only city north of Lake Louisville that the county has participated in one of these districts with.
That's right, up to date. And I think that's a real tribute to the relationship that the mayor and you as council members have formed or created with the county. So it's a good working relationship. They understand what we're trying to accomplish. I think y'all have done a wonderful job of communicating that, and there's certainly buy-in from their viewpoint.
So Bob, the next question revolves around critical infrastructure. And what we learned during the February ice storm was that the backups that had been in place for the lift stations and the water pumps failed us. And those backups were 2 separate lines from 2 separate power stations, so that in the event that any one power station failed, we would never lose power to these systems. What we learned with Encore is that when they decategorized us down from a 1 priority to a 2, we lost that backup. And so we need generators on those items. Does this budget address those backup systems?
Yeah, yes. And I'll say this from two perspectives. One, it was a priority for the council. And so, if you go back to that May 27th workshop, and that was identified as the essential priority, I suppose. So it's funded from that perspective. The second is that Congress has appropriated funds through the American Rescue Plan, and critical infrastructure is one of those, and that does relate to utilities. So in this budget, we have included funding for generators for the pump station, generators for the lift stations within the wastewater system, and also generators for Fire Station 2, Public Works, and also for City Hall. And so from that standpoint, I think we're in good shape. Now, in addition to that, we've also included funding for the radio contact, because if you'll remember in February, we were struggling with some of the communications.
Yeah, the cell phones didn't work out too well,
That's right. So we have included in this infrastructure the funding for radios to help, as well as some of the SCADA system, which is how we monitor and operate our water system, looking at water levels in the water tanks and so forth. So we have expanded and strengthened that as well.
So the next question, Bob, has to do with parks. So not only do our citizens love parks, but we've got some excellent parks, from our neighborhood parks to our community parks. Does this budget address our park system?
Yes, and I think it does on both fronts. One is we're in the midst now of doing some substantial improvements to the community park, new shade structures, replacing fencing, making substantial improvements to the ball fields. And so that's underway. When we talk about parks in general, we've got about 20 neighborhood parks. And you're right, they're quite popular in the way that they're used. And so if you'll think back to a year ago when we talked about putting together an asset management plan and how do we replace those assets long term, what this budget does is say that we're going to replace the equipment within a park once a year. So over the next 20 years, we'll be replacing all those parks. This year, we'll start with the Meadowview Park.
Great.
It's the oldest park that we have. It's heavily used, so we'll be rebuilding that during the year. The last element that you'll see that's a little different is with the Katy Trail. That was installed a number of years ago. It has historically been maintained with the city of Denton, but now we are going to step in and take over the maintenance of that trail within the Corinth city limits. The last element, and this is going back a year or two as well, when Piper Davison, the young lady in the Girl Scouts, has been working on the dog park. We've been working closely with her. Her fundraising is still going on very well, and we'll be working with her to make that dog park a reality. So you'll see some city participation and a lot of the work that she has put in.
So Bob, Piper still has a GoFundMe page available if Corinthians want to help donate to that dog park. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's good opportunity to do that, helping with the park generally, and with some of the particular assets within the park that would allow you to have your name or a plaque on it as well.
Very good. So please visit down below, the comments down below. We will include a link to Piper's GoFundMe page. So Bob, with Corinth growing, this requires a lot of work from engineering. And one of the things that we do every year is we update our 5-year capital improvement program. And that addresses things like drainage, for instance, which has been a concern in the past. Does this budget also include items that address our capital improvement program?
Yes, and when we talk about a capital improvements plan, we're really looking at improvements to our street system, to the water and wastewater system and drainage. So it's a rolling 5-year plan that you're really considering. With regard to, let me start with water supply for a moment. We do have money in this budget to secure land for a new elevated water storage tank. We know that we're going to need one within this 5-year window. So we'll be buying the land, working on the design. So in about 3 years, we'll begin building the tank. So that's how we think about that 5-year term. We also have at the pump station change outs with our impellers so that we can get more volume of water through the pump station. We have on the wastewater side, we would be replacing some of the wastewater lines where we're getting what we refer to as infiltration and inflow, and that is water that's outside the system getting into cracks or seals in the wastewater system. And that's costly because that's more wastewater that's being carried by the wastewater line and then ultimately being treated. So keeping our line tight and secure in that sense saves us money over the long term. We'll also be making significant upgrades to the barrel strap lift station. It's again tied to the wastewater system. On the water side, we'll be doing quite a bit of work on the woods ground storage tanks. Those tanks have to be checked periodically, and about every 10 to 15 years, we go in and actually drain the tank, seal the insides, repaint to help the longevity for those. So those are the kind of improvements on the water and the wastewater side. Now, the element that's always been at a high priority here has been dealing with the drainage, and much of it's related to Lynchburg Creek. And if you'll recall, we were in Washington about 2 years ago meeting with Congressman Burgess and trying to get assistance with the funding for improvements in that area. We've continued to work with him, with the FEMA offices, with the state offices, and so we have received a grant to make those improvements. We are currently in the 90-day review period, and after which we'll be able to proceed to design on that particular project. So sometime in the mid to the latter part of 2022, residents can start to see some improvements to Lynchburg Creek that will take some 80 homes out of the floodplain, and that will make a significant improvement along Lynchburg Creek.
So the next topic that I'd like to discuss is technology. So very important to the City of Corinth, not only for cybersecurity, but also effectiveness and efficiency of our staff members. I know that the city is working on a technology strategic plan, which should be completed sometime in September. But can you tell us how in this budget we're going to address technology?
Yes, and so much of this is related to the work out of the strategic plan for that area. But even going back a year ago, when the city council adopted, as a priority, dealing with cybersecurity and all, we do annual cybersecurity audits. We do training with the staff, with the city council, with board members. We actually do phishing tests with all of our users, and we far exceed the state requirements in that area. Also in technology, we are trying to go paperless in all of our areas. So this year we're focusing on police and human resources. So just a lot of just trying to get rid of paper within those areas. Another element that we're quite dependent on is we're a member of the North Texas Innovation Alliance, and that's where a lot of the cities have come together, particularly those in the information technology arena. and looking at ways we can learn from each other in the work that's going on. So we're taking some leads for those. We're getting better contacts and resources to help us address those areas. Some of that coming out of that is we'll be replacing our phone system. That's one of the weaknesses that we saw from the winter storm. And you could even go back and talk about that as part of the critical infrastructure. I kind of chose to mention it here in technology instead, but where it'd be easier for residents when we're calling is to get rid of the phone tree system and make it much easier to get to the person, make the phone messages work, and the way that we can track phone calls. And we can actually monitor the calls and the demand on the system much better.
And so, Bob, I wanted to bring up one other piece of technology that I personally have found very useful. About a month ago, I went on to the myCorinth app. I clicked on the little button called Report a Concern and was able to take photos of cement repair that needed to be done. And it was amazing how quickly the response was. They told me that they had started work. They told me where they were at in the process. And then they sent me photos showing that it had been repaired and closed the ticket out. So when we talk about technology, the way our citizens access the city and city services are those items that we foresee will improve and be addressed?
Yes, and that's a great example. And our ability to find those, to bring those to the table is because of the network that we have in place and talking with other communities around the country, quite honestly. But the report of concern is really a pretty remarkable piece. We're getting very good reports on that. And probably we'll go back to my earlier comment about replacing the phone system. We won't need us. But no, it's a great way. And that's a 24/7 kind of access point. And beyond that, we also will be introducing CityBot very soon, next month or so, where you can actually text in your concern. You can just actually bypass the app in that particular case just by texting that. We'll be promoting that here in the next 6 weeks to 2 months.
So public safety is very important to the citizens of Corinth, not only police and fire, but all of the other activities that a city would do to keep their residents safe. So how does this budget address public safety?
This budget is very similar, like some of the others, in terms of looking at some of the asset management. So we're replacing bunker gear in the fire department, the taser equipment in the police department, the body cameras, all of those. And it's important that as we buy those, we have a plan to replace them. Same thing with the radios. So we're replacing radios for both police and fire in this budget. Beyond that replacement of those assets, we also will be adding a drone, and police and fire will both use it, as will public works. So you'll see that used citywide, but that will be part of our arsenal, if you will. Then we'll also be acquiring an accident reconstruction software and hardware. We're doing that jointly with the city of Little Elm, and that will help us in reconstructing particularly high-speed accidents like on FM 2181 or Interstate 35. Now, as we begin to look a little bit more long-term, we'll also have a time primarily working with the class from UTA to look at the future fire station locations, how we ought to be thinking about fire station replacements, where they should be, and all. And we'll be doing that with the other 3 cities. Tied to this, we'll also be working with the city of Lake Dallas, looking at perhaps merging the police departments. We'll spend a year. We'll look at do a feasibility study. Be a lot of conversations at the council level about what that will look like. And then we already provide service to the city of Shady Shores. So we're going to have to make sure that they're a part of that conversation as well. And then lastly, we'll be adding an additional crossing guard for those residents that live generally in the area of Lake Sharon and Oakmont. When Lake Sharon was opened up to $24.99, that caused quite a bit of concern in that area. So this budget does add a crossing guard.
So, Bob, I've got a follow-up question about the merger between Lake Dallas and Corinth Police Departments. The first question is the feasibility study. What do we foresee is going to be the result, or what does that process look like?
I would think it has two components. One is we'll be looking at the technical feasibility about how operationally the department could be merged, the number of officers that are needed, the number of support that staff that's needed, and so we'll be looking at that. The other will be looking at the more what I would refer to as the governance component. Policy-wise, how is that going to actually be accomplished? Now, when we talk about it from an operational standpoint, you always have to remember that currently we have a mutual aid agreement. And so when Lake Dallas needs help, we go over and help them. When we need help, they come over and help us. So in that sense, you're not going to see a change beyond what's going on because we work very closely together now. The other element that's there is that because we do the fire department jointly, we call it the Lake City's Fire Department, that causes the police departments to work a lot closer together as well. And so when I talk about this study, we'll be looking more at the technical features. Where should district boundaries be drawn? How many people should be on duty at any one time from a staffing perspective? And we'll be looking at data among all three cities, Lake Dallas, Shady Shores, and Corinth, figuring out the best way to run the department for all three towns collectively.
So one of the things that we know is that Corinthians love their police department. They love seeing the Corinth police cars in their neighborhoods. They love the response time. They love the whole feel of our police department. So is one of the things that we're going to be monitoring after Lake Dallas approached us about this idea, the ability for Corinth to retain its level of service?
Yes, and I think one of the elements that really makes or that sets Corinth apart is the public safety academy that we do. The residents, they get involved, they become members of VIPs, the volunteers in policing, and it's that personal feel that I think that really sets our department apart, not just in the Lake Cities, but more within the region. We want to keep that. Now, coupled with that, we do want to go back and have community meetings, get community feedback, because if you lose that, it's not worth moving forward there. I mean, I think that's the one thing that y'all have been very clear about in the council, that you don't want to lose that element of the policing. So that will be included in the study that's occurring. And we want to make sure that we're getting good feedback and getting a good feel. I think what I would be hopeful in seeing is should we move forward, is then those elements will actually begin to occur within Lake Dallas. We're already doing that in Shady Shores, and we have folks from Shady Shores involved in VIPs and doing things in Corinth and in Shady Shores. And I think it would be good for the region to see all three communities taking that kind of an approach.
So the study will be completed when, Bob?
We'll be preparing a request for proposals, and I would hope that we would have it completed by July, so that if you want to do that for a year from now, then you've got adequate time to work out an agreement.
So plenty of time for public input, plenty of time for both the Lake Dallas and the City of Corinth city councils, respective councils, to sit and discuss.
Yes, and I wouldn't feel compelled to say that while we want to get the study done by July with the soft target of having an emergency department by October 1, that can easily get pushed back because you want to be comfortable. We want the community to be comfortable before we proceed, whatever the decision may be.
Tune in next time for part 2 of our budget discussion.